Alright, guys. This is Video Game Lover here. I know I'm like almost a week late on this story, but I really wanted to talk about it. And this kind of blew up a little bit because it made a bunch of people a little bit conspiratorial. So let me explain. Sony confirms that the PlayStation 2 has sold over 160 million consoles worldwide. It's the highest selling console ever. So let me explain why this was like an apparent controversy. For the longest time, I think since 2014 or 2015, it was announced that the PlayStation 2 sold around 157 million units. It is, to this day, the highest selling console of all time. And this story, when it broke out, garnered controversy because a lot of people were wondering, is Sony actually inflating the numbers? Are they really saying that it's 160 or it's 157 or even less than that? In my opinion, no, I don't think that's the case. I just think that it is around 157 or 160. Now, I will say this. If for some reason Sony then says they sold over 165 million, then I'm going to get a little suspicious. The reason why that there's like some Nintendo fanboys and Xbox fanboys, well, it's mostly Nintendo fanboys, that are believing that the numbers are fake is because the Nintendo Switch is on pace to actually outselling the PS2. It's at, 146 million? So it's 8 million below the DS, but it's still 14 million below the PS2, or 11 million. So, like, if the Switch hangs around for, 2 more years, and if there's still heavy hitter games to come out, then there is a good possibility that it may outdo the PS2. Now, I'll say this. If Sony does this, like, the PS2 actually sold 165 million or 170 million, then this is petty on their part. Like, Sony, records are meant to be broken. Look at the Honky Tonk Man's Intercontinental Championship record. Everyone thought that record was never going to be broken, and Gunther ended up breaking that record. But now I want to get to the one part of this whole controversy that gets annoying with me. There are still a group of Nintendo fanboys, and I saw this a lot on Twitter, that were saying that the reason why that the PS2 sold as well as it did is because it was a DVD player. That was the reason. That was the reason why it sold 160 million units. It wasn't because it had one of the greatest libraries in gaming history. It wasn't the fact that it had a lot of first party and third party support. No, it was that it was a DVD player. It had a DVD player. It was the cheapest DVD player you could get, and that's why it sold 160 million units. That's a lie. Let me explain. Early on, okay, yes, that's true. When the PS2 came out, it was the cheapest DVD player. But as time progressed, a lot of DVD players ended up being really cheap. You could buy DVD players for $50 to $100. And the PS2 was still $150 to $200? So that argument doesn't work. It didn't sold that much because it's a DVD player. It sold all these consoles because it's one of the greatest consoles ever made. It's Sony's greatest PlayStation system they have ever made. It has one of the largest libraries in gaming history, one of the greatest libraries in gaming history. It had fighting games, it had first-person shooters, it had third-person shooters, platformers, strategy games, JRPGs, action RPGs, puzzle games, rail shooting games, arcade games, you name it, the PS2 had you covered. There's a reason why that even some of the most die-hard, partisan fanboys of certain consoles like the PS2. It's because its library was massive. So no, it's not because the PS2 didn't sold 160 million because it was a DVD player. It sold that much because it's one of the greatest consoles of all time. It's just so stupid. I don't know why people think this. And I never understood like why this story was a massive controversy to even begin with. Like, everyone kind of knew, like, the PS2 sold at the very least 157 million units. But now Sony confirms it sold over 160 million. So, like, around 160. But I'll say this. If Sony, for some reason, like, if the Switch starts to catch up to the PS2, and all of a sudden Sony comes out and says that, oh, actually it sold 170 million, then okay, then I'll eat crow. Until then, let it go, guys. Let it go. The PS2 sold over 160 million. It sold 157 million. Get the fuck over it. Get over it. That's all I gotta say. Video Game Lord 58. See you guys later. Peace.